You know how it is, you really want to get a handle on something, something important, understand all the nuances, the turning points, but just the thought of wading through all the details feels, well, it can be overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So today, we've got just the thing, a really focused exploration. It's kind of a shortcut to truly understanding a remarkable life.
We do indeed. And our source material for this deep dive is excerpts from the autobiography My Life.
Right.
And what makes autobiographies like this so valuable, I think, is the direct access they give you to an individual's own lived experiences, their perspectives.
Yeah.
It's a chance to see the world through their eyes.
Yeah.
You know, to trace how their identity, their passions develop sort of from the inside out.
Exactly. It's way more than just a timeline of events, isn't it? It's about finding those foundational moments, the influences that really, truly shaped a person. We're not just reading about what happened.
No.
We're trying to understand how those early experiences, well, how they forged the path to their later achievements.
And that's pretty much our mission today, isn't it? To pull out the most compelling insights from these early years, the key influences, those emerging passions.
Mm-hmm.
So you, the listener, can grasp the essential foundations of this person's life story, but without feeling, lost in just a sea of information.
Think of it as getting the core understanding.
Exactly, the crucial building blocks.
Oh, wow, what a rich tapestry these excerpts weave. I mean, we're seeing everything from these strange childhood encounters that, frankly, border on the uncanny, to this powerful early connection with theater and music, academic journeys with their own, triumphs and setbacks, and those formative, often messy personal relationships that kind of define our early years. Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it. Maybe we start by looking at the author's early sensitivities. Because what immediately strikes you is a childhood marked by these very, very intense reactions to things most of us wouldn't think twice about.
Like what?
Well, we read about actual shrieks of fright because, get this, furniture seemed to be alive.
Wow.
And these recurring ghostly dreams that apparently would only stop when a human voice was heard. It speaks to a really vivid inner world.
It paints a picture of a really heightened awareness, doesn't it? This deep sensitivity to their surroundings.
Absolutely.
And that sensitivity wasn't just internal, right? We also see the early influence of the theater, particularly through their stepfather.
Yes.
Who was even involved in painting scenery. I mean, that must have created a pretty dramatic backdrop for a young, impressionable mind. Did that early immersion, you think, in the visual and dramatic arts spark something?
Oh, it almost certainly did. That whole theatrical environment seems to have been, fertile ground for the author's early creative impulses.
Yeah.
It led to their first attempts at storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
Crafting puppets and even penning a chivalric drama.
Ah, yes, the puppets and the chivalric drama. And here's where it gets really interesting and very human.
Mm-hmm.
Because this budding artistic effort wasn't exactly met with universal acclaim, was it?
Not quite, no.
That anecdote about the sisters finding the manuscript and literally laughing it to scorn, that's a moment I think anyone who's ever shared something they're proud of can kind of relate to.
Oh, definitely.
How might that early, maybe harsh feedback have shaped the author, do you think?
Well, that early experience, even though it seems sort of trivial now, likely gave the author a bit of a thicker skin.
Yeah.
And perhaps a more critical view on initial judgment. It's a trait we might see pop up again later, in their run-ins with critics.
Okay.
And moving on to their academic pursuits, we actually see a similar pattern. Initial resistance, sort of giving way to passionate engagement, though maybe with a hint of regret for what might have been.
Like their experience with languages, for instance.
Yeah.
Initially a real dislike, a barrier, but then the switch flipped when they understood the physiological and philosophical side of it through Jacob Grimm's work. It just highlights how the framing of knowledge can be so crucial. The regret that this perspective wasn't there earlier, it really makes you wonder how their education might have gone differently.
Exactly.
It kind of speaks to the limits of a one-size-fits-all approach to learning, maybe.
Precisely. A subject can go from tedious to absolutely captivating, depending on how it's presented.
Yeah.
The connections that are made. And then we have that fascinating episode with the English grammar passage.
Okay, this is a story with a real twist. The imagery fading stars, nature sinking in years, it's so evocative.
It is.
But then to have Sillig accuse it of plagiarism, ouch. The initial sting of that must have been pretty significant.
You'd think so.
But here's the unexpected turn. After some revisions, this very passage actually leads to the acceptance and even wider circulation of the author's poem. Talk about a surprising silver lining.
It really is.
What does this tell us about their resilience, maybe, and just the unpredictable nature of recognition?
Well, it's a powerful example of how a setback can sometimes unexpectedly pave the way for success. The stark contrast between Selig's initial dismissal and the headmaster's eventual acceptance, it really underscores the subjective nature of judgment.
True.
And the potential for, well, redemption and even triumph through just sticking with it and refining your work.
But the academic path wasn't always one of eventual triumph, was it? That entrance exam for St. Nicholas's School in Leipzig was a clear disappointment.
Yeah, that sounds rough.
Being placed in a lower form than they were in Dresden and having to put aside Homer, that must have been a real blow to their intellectual ego. And just a frustrating sense of being held back, you know.
It really speaks to the sometimes arbitrary nature of educational systems and that personal frustration when you feel your progress is being undermined.
Definitely.
Now, shifting focus a bit to social and intellectual development, we see this strong pull of student life, the allure of the comment within the student clubs.
Right, this comment, it's described as this set of very strict rules almost for maintaining a kind of exclusive club atmosphere among students. But for the author, it represented something more profound, didn't it? It was seen as a form of emancipation. What was the appeal there in this seemingly rigid code?
Well, for the author, the comment, despite seeming maybe a bit pedantic, it offered a framework for self-governance, a sense of belonging outside of school and family.
Oh, okay.
It was a way to forge an independent identity, to engage in intellectual life on their own terms, which maybe explains the growing dislike for the more prescribed, drier studies of formal education.
Right, that makes sense.
This desire for connection, for intellectual stimulation beyond the curriculum, it's a common thread, I think, in many formative journeys. And then we have that rather touching anecdote about unexpected kindness.
Oh, yes, the money lender in Prague. What's striking is that the author had completely forgotten about this person, having left Prague early.
Yeah.
And then weeks later, this individual just appears, not even chasing the debt, but simply to check on the author's well-being. It's a really heartwarming moment, highlights the capacity for genuine human concern.
It really does.
Yeah.
It serves as a reminder that acts of kindness can pop up from unexpected places, and motivations aren't always, self-serving.
Yeah. Contrast that with the rather mortifying experience of being recognized by Sister Audely's friends in Prague.
Oh, yes. Sunburnt, wearing simple clothes. It sounds like a classic case of youthful self-consciousness clashing head-on with social expectations.
Totally. Especially when you're trying to make a good impression. It's a humorous moment, sure, but also kind of a poignant reminder of how much importance we place on appearances, particularly during those formative social interactions.
Indeed. These social encounters, both the good and the bad, play such a crucial role in shaping our evolving sense of self, how we navigate the complexities of the world. Shall we turn our attention now to the author's musical encounters? They seem to have left a particularly strong mark.
Yes, Weber's Freischütz apparently created this really profound impression. But the way the author tried to relive that experience is so unique, not through formal study, but by just absorbing fragments played by their sisters and developing a fondness for someone just because they could play the overture. It's like an almost osmotic connection to the music. What does that tell us about their early musical appreciation?
It suggests a very visceral, very emotional connection to music, a deep yearning to just be in its presence in any form possible.
Right.
It indicates more of an intuitive rather than a purely intellectual engagement, perhaps.
Then there's the intense fascination with Beethoven's Fidelio Overture and the profound impact of learning about Beethoven's death.
That sense of personal loss, for someone whose art resonated so deeply, even without a direct personal connection, it really underscores the power of artistic expression, how it can touch our lives so profoundly.
Absolutely. And then we're introduced to Old Kuhnlein. What an intriguing character.
Isn't he? An eccentric musician, fervent devotion to Mozart, clear disdain for Weber, his heavily annotated copy of Goethe's Faust, apparently filled with his musical opinions. It paints such a vivid picture of a passionate, if maybe somewhat idiosyncratic, musical mind. And the fact that the brother-in-law entrusted the author's early compositions to him, it sort of suggests a desire for mentorship, even from someone so unconventional.
Yeah. It's like the author was seeking out diverse perspectives, trying to shape their own artistic development.
Exactly. It's as if they were absorbing all these different musical viewpoints, trying to find their own unique voice amidst these really strong influences.
Okay, so shifting to their early career and relationships, we start to see the social dynamics around the author a bit more clearly.
Yes, the uncle's blunt disdain for Philistine peculiarities, that offers a little glimpse into a certain intellectual climate and the author's early exposure to critical viewpoints. But more significantly, I think we see the emergence of this supportive relationship with their sister Audelie.
Audelie, yes, the confidant for the great poetic enterprise. And during those secret recitations, despite her own reservations, that really speaks to a strong bond of sibling support.
It does.
It highlights how important it is to have someone in your corner, even if they don't fully grasp your vision, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's the sister in Dresden, the one engaged at the Leipzig theater.
Right.
That warm reception, experiencing tenderness from a sister, it suggests maybe a deep-seated yearning for familial connection and approval in the author's life.
Now let's maybe examine the beginnings of their political awareness.
Okay.
The July Revolution in Paris seems to have been a real awakening.
Yeah, viewing it as this heroic popular struggle, so different from the French Revolution in their eyes. And the palpable suspense as rebellion spread across Europe. You can really sense the author's growing awareness of these broader social and political currents. How did this event shift their perspective, do you think?
Well, this period of pretty significant political upheaval clearly ignited a sense of political consciousness in the author, moving beyond just personal and artistic concerns to engage with broader societal forces.
Right.
And we also see their early attempts to integrate this burgeoning political awareness with their musical aspirations. Friedrich und Freiheit music, intended for the Leipzig garden concerts, before it was overtaken by the unrest in Leipzig.
Yes.
And this idea of national life being defined then by the antagonism between Leipzigers and Prussians, it really places the author in a very specific historical context that shaped their early ambitions.
And the experience of standing guard at the gates in Leipzig, the influx of students from other universities, it paints this picture of a society undergoing significant change.
Yeah.
With the author actively participating in these events and aspiring to establish themselves within the intellectual circles of their academic peers.
It's fascinating how intertwined personal development and these larger historical forces were in shaping the author's early life. Then we get a glimpse into some contrasting social environments.
Yes, the strange custom of deliberate, humorless drunkenness among some university students.
Right.
Offers a stark contrast to what the author perceived as the nobler spirit of the lower classes. Their indignation at receiving insulting remarks for deploring the Battle of Ostrolenka reveals a developing sense of moral conviction and a willingness to stand against prevailing opinions, even then.
And then Vincenz Tyszkiewicz enters the picture, an exile who becomes the author's ideal of a true man. That kind of intense admiration for an individual can be such a powerful force in shaping your own values and aspirations. What qualities did Tyszkiewicz possess that so resonated with the author?
Well, Tyszkiewicz, as an exile, likely embodied a sense of principled resistance, maybe a worldly perspective that really resonated with the author's growing political awareness and desire for a more meaningful existence.
Right.
These kinds of formative relationships often provide crucial role models, don't they? They shape our understanding of the world.
Definitely.
We also have a more lighthearted anecdote involving Moritz and a parody sent to the much-feared chief of the Conservatoire, musician Kittel.
Sending a parody of Schiller's Burgschaft to someone described as much feared definitely suggests a certain boldness, or maybe just playful irreverence. And it gives us another glimpse into their frequent interactions within the musical community. Now let's circle back to those early theatrical aspirations and the inevitable bumps in the road.
Right. The initial puppet performance, the chivalric drama, as we discussed, the sister's negative reaction really stands out.
Yeah.
It underscores that persistent challenge of seeking validation for creative work, even from those closest to you. How might these early rejections have affected their persistence, do you think?
It's possible those early dismissals actually fueled a stronger sense of determination, a need to prove their worth despite those initial setbacks.
Could be.
Then we have the move to Würzburg, staying with their eldest brother Albert, who had a theater appointment. The clear intention was to apply their musical knowledge practically at that smaller theater. It sounds like a deliberate step towards realizing their musical ambitions.
It's a crucial move, yeah. Providing a hands-on environment to test their musical skills, gain practical experience in the theatrical world. The encounter in Bamberg with Schunke, learning the story of Caspar Hauser. It's just a reminder of the diverse experiences and compelling stories that could capture a young artist's imagination.
And then there's the task of conducting Weber's Die Feen, even though they didn't particularly like it.
Right.
But the growing interest in its interpretation because their future as a conductor was on the line, that's a powerful motivator. It demonstrates a developing sense of professional responsibility alongside their artistic inclinations.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights that sometimes you have to do things you don't love to reach your goals, doesn't it?
Indeed. It underscores that often necessary balancing act between personal preference and professional opportunity. We also see the emergence of early romantic feelings with Therese Ringelmann.
The chorus lady.
Yeah.
And the ambition to help her become a great singer. It's a classic example, isn't it, of youthful infatuation intertwined with artistic aspirations.
Very much so. Moving on to other developing relationships, we're introduced to Rosalie.
Ah.
The friendship with Rosalie is described as purely platonic and sincere, emphasizing her exceptional individuality, despite a perceived lack of significant acting talent. It highlights the importance of diverse kinds of connections in life relationships, built on mutual respect and understanding, not just romantic attraction or professional gain.
And the writing of music for a Polish story involving a love affair with a Russian, and then the mutual decision not to set it to music, it hints at a sensitivity to the political and cultural complexities of the time, even in their artistic choices back then.
That's an interesting point. Then comes the development of the libretto for Die Hohe Braut.
Based on H. Koenig's novel and the journey to Würzburg in 1833 to set it to music. This shows a sustained commitment to their operatic ambitions, a proactive approach to bringing their creative ideas to life.
Definitely. And the meeting with the directors in Magdeburg, their initial satisfaction with the work that must have provided a significant boost of encouragement.
The proposal for a gala performance with new music for New Year's Day. That sounds like a major opportunity, a chance to really showcase their talent.
It does.
And the move to Magdeburg and the beginning of the complex relationship with Minna starts to take center stage in the narrative here.
Yes, Minna's assurances regarding the behavior of theatergoers, and then the subsequent arguments about her interactions with others. They reveal the early seeds of tension, perhaps possessiveness, within this relationship, suggesting potential challenges ahead.
It definitely sets the stage for a personal life that seems to have been just as dramatic, really, as their artistic pursuits. But amidst all this, there were significant early successes, weren't there?
Absolutely. The completion of a substantial portion of the opera Liebesverbot in Magdeburg and the positive reception of 2 duets at a concert. These were important milestones. They indicate a growing confidence in their compositional abilities.
And the performance of the Grand Overture in C major with the Musical Society concerts in Magdeburg, that sounds like a key moment in building their local reputation.
It certainly seems so.
And then managing to get the renowned Madame Schroeder-Devrient to come to Magdeburg for special performances. That must have been an incredibly valuable experience.
Oh, undoubtedly. A stimulating and educational experience, exposing the author to the work of a highly respected, very experienced professional. The increasing personal popularity in Magdeburg due to the repeated performances of the Liebesverbot overture certainly points to a rising artistic profile. However, as you noted, the personal life remained quite intricate.
Yeah, intricate is a good word. The journey to Dresden, the encounter with Minna and her sister, persuading Minna to return. It's just a flurry of personal drama unfolding alongside their professional work.
Right.
And the secret visit from a depressed friend in Leipzig where they shared verses from Liebesverbot, a moment of artistic connection amidst personal turmoil.
And the difficulties encountered in securing funds for that anticipated journey after the Magdeburg theatrical season. It just underscores the ongoing financial instability that characterized so much of their early career.
Yeah, a constant struggle.
The seemingly casual return visit to Würzburg, the melancholy encounter with Friedrich Galvani, they hint at lingering emotional attachments, maybe unresolved personal history.
But their work continued. The positive experience collaborating with the theater in Magdeburg, even presenting Spohr's Gisanda, demonstrates a growing versatility and engagement with the existing repertoire. And the ongoing disagreements with director Bethmann about strengthening the orchestra highlight a recurring theme. That clash between artistic vision and practical limitations.
Yes, definitely. The relationship with Minna in Magdeburg becomes increasingly fraught. Her decision to pursue an engagement in Berlin, going against their agreement,
Right.
and the author's passionate letter proposing marriage in an attempt to persuade her return, it's a period marked by really intense emotional fluctuations.
And then the news from their brother-in-law Wolfram about Minna's alleged scandalous conduct in Berlin. That must have been a significant emotional blow, leading them to confide in family about the complexities of their love life. Minna's return to Magdeburg with her mother, followed by the author's departure, suggests a decisive, if painful, turning point.
And the precarious financial circumstances in both Magdeburg and Königsberg just further emphasize the uncertain nature of the author's early career path. The initial plan for Minna to travel to Lübeck to await a ship to Riga indicates a planned separation, though perhaps not a permanent one initially.
But new opportunities were emerging, right? The unexpected offer from the Königsberg director to take on the role of musical conductor, contingent on a vacancy, that presented a new path.
That it did.
And Minna's prior involvement with an amateur theatrical group led to an offer from the Dessau Court Theater, suggesting her own career aspirations were also definitely in play.
Yes, and the director's subsequent difficulties in Magdeburg after Minna left, coupled with that brief, challenging stint in Bernburg with director Bethmann under meager conditions. It paints a realistic picture of the struggles within the provincial theater world back then. Minna's decision to go to Berlin for an engagement, despite their understanding, the author's resulting grief, and then the eventual proposal of marriage. It just underscores the intricate and often contradictory dynamics of their relationship.
The journey to Riga, including that week-long delay in Travemünde due to bad winds, and the genesis of an idea for a truly German comic opera while reading Till Eulenspiegel. It's fascinating how inspiration can strike in the most mundane circumstances.
Isn't it? And then the surprise at seeing the Beethoven devotee transformed into a champion of Bellini and Adam in Riga. It's a reminder that musical tastes and allegiances can be pretty fluid.
True.
The initial feelings of unease, that longing to escape theatrical life in Riga, they reveal a growing sense of disillusionment with the current path. The frequent disagreements with members of the Riga company attributed to a strong desire for artistic excellence and the resulting animosity from director Holtai. They highlight the challenges inherent in collaborative artistic work, differing visions.
And that negative review in the Zeitschrift für Musik, ridiculing the Magdeburg and Rule Britannia overtures, that added another layer of professional setback. Ouch.
Yeah. But personal relationships could also offer some solace. The reconciliation with Minna, her comforting reassurances, her securing a contract in Königsberg that provided a much-needed glimmer of hope.
And the introduction of the eccentric Abraham Muller in Königsberg, who became friendly with both Minna and the author, brought an unexpected connection, maybe a bit of levity to their lives.
Perhaps. Though the rather awkward situation with the Königsberg director having to find a temporary conductor until Schubert left created a somewhat tense atmosphere upon the author's arrival,
Right.
much to Schubert's obvious displeasure. Minna's eventual arrival in Königsberg and their subsequent reconciliation ultimately paved the way for their marriage.
The modest wedding ceremony in Tridheim Church in Königsberg marked the beginning of a new chapter. However, financial difficulties persisted despite Minna's efforts at household economy.
Always the money struggles.
Yeah. The author's ongoing attempts to secure a permanent position in Königsberg were complicated by the presence of the existing conductor, Schubert, eventually leading just to the offer of a temporary retaining fee, not ideal. And Minna's firm refusal to accept Holtai's engagement offer suggests a strong commitment to their relationship, at least at that point, even amidst professional uncertainties.
The news of the death of the author's sister Rosalie brought profound sorrow, but improved professional prospects eventually led to a decision to return to Germany. The offer of a position at the Riga Theater, with the intention of enabling Minna to retire from the stage, represented a significant shift in their plans.
But then the unpleasant interactions with director Holtai in Riga, including his improper advances towards Minna, that created further complications and just underscored the challenges they constantly faced.
Definitely. But new horizons were being considered. The secret work on the libretto for Rienzi with the intention of taking it to Paris. That's a bold, ambitious undertaking.
It really is.
And correspondence with the renowned scribe about potentially setting H. König's Die Hohe Braut to music suggests a strategic approach to forging influential connections.
Right. Planning ahead.
Plans to journey to Paris in the summer of 1839 were finalized. despite that significant hurdle of limited finances, their meager savings barely covering existing debts. And Abraham Meller's rather flippant suggestion for securing the necessary funds adds a touch of dark humor to their precarious situation.
Doesn't it just? The journey to the Russo-Prussian frontier with Muller and Minna sounded far from comfortable, cramped conditions, Muller's anxiety about crossing. Their arrival in Palau, traveling in a wagon to deliberately avoid Königsberg, paints a picture of a somewhat clandestine departure. And that stormy sea voyage on the Thetis, the fear of the reef, the eventual sight of the English coast, must have been truly harrowing.
Absolutely. Their arrival in London, with its overwhelming sights and sounds, provided a temporary distraction from their recent hardships.
Sending the Rule Britannia overture to Sir John Smart in London, and the enjoyable experience visiting Sir George Smart, meeting various musicians, even a bishop, provided valuable early connections in a new land. Failing to get into the lower house, but seeing the room where the Commons convened offered a glimpse into British political life. The crossing to France, arrival in Boulogne-sur-Mer, resulted in a firm resolution: never travel by sea again.
Can't blame them after that experience.
Right. The strategic decision to spend a few weeks near Boulogne, figuring it was too early in the season to find important people in Paris, shows a thoughtful approach to their networking.
It does. Meeting Heinrich Dorn in Paris, who also planned to return to Germany, and Lers, who offered encouragement and help with French, provided crucial early support in Paris. Their initial attempts at composing to French texts, the idea of creating a bass aria for the celebrated La Blanche, it indicates an adaptability to their new surroundings, a proactive search for opportunities.
And the visit to La Blanche, who proved immediately receptive, that marked a promising early connection.
But a significant turning point was coming. The perceived decline in musical tastes, the negative influence of what they called the dreadful theater, led to feelings of disappointment, regret. However, the profound experience of hearing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony performed in an unprecedented way sparked this renewed sense of artistic inspiration. Reminiscent of their earlier powerful encounter with Schroeder-Devrient in Fidelio.
Oh, yes.
This intense desire to compose something equally impactful grew alongside their anxiety about their precarious situation in Paris, ultimately leading to the initial sketches of an overture to Faust.
That performance of the Ninth Symphony must have been truly transformative. What was it about that experience, do you think, that had such a profound effect?
Well, that performance likely served as a powerful reminder of the artistic heights that could be reached.
Right.
And perhaps it contrasted sharply with the musical environment they were currently experiencing in Paris, igniting a renewed sense of purpose, a longing to create something of similar depth and impact.
Makes sense. Establishing a home in Paris began with Minna's resourceful decision to manage household expenses to save money, despite their initial lack of furniture. Their move into the apartments on the Rue du Helder was quickly followed by disheartening news from Anders about the bankruptcy and closure of the Théâtre de la Renaissance, a significant setback that immediately tested their resilience in this new environment.
Oof.
Yeah. Tough break. Driven by the desire to gain recognition and support, they sought to have excerpts from Liebesverbot performed for influential figures, leading to contact with M. Edouard Monet at the Grand Opera, an invitation to Scribe to attend a trial performance.
Trying everything.
The continued support of Laube through Count Kuselu's secretary offered a vital lifeline during this challenging period. Their financial constraints were such that they had to forego personal belongings, and an agreement was made with Schlesinger to contribute articles to the Gazette Musicale as a way to settle a debt.
It sounds like a constant struggle just to stay afloat.
It really does.
Indeed, navigating the Parisian music scene proved to be a complex endeavor. They were initially asked by Schlesinger to write a new cornet method, a task they were then relieved of, only to be commissioned to write 14 suites for the cornet A pistons, for which Schlesinger provided this extensive library of 60 opera scores as source material.
Wow.
Simultaneously, they kept up correspondence with Madame Schroeder-Devrient and actively sought opportunities to get Die Feen introduced in Dresden, enlisting support from Hofrat Winkler and conductor Reisiger in their efforts to connect back with the German musical establishment.
The financial hardship continued, with Minna frequently undertaking these expeditions to try and raise money. The unexpected return of their stolen dog Robber amidst a dense fog offered a brief moment of comfort and familiarity in a foreign land.
A little bit of good news there.
Yeah. Earning a modest 300 francs from Schlesinger for proofreading Donizetti's opera score provided small but welcome financial relief, and they dedicated time to meticulously copying out the orchestra parts for the Faust overture, hoping for a future performance. During this struggle, they also found creative outlet writing the short story Ein Pilgerfahrt zu Beethoven, which was well received under its French title. Une Visite à Beethoven, when published in the Gazette Musicale, and later penning a sequel, Das Ende eines Musikers in Paris. It seems writing became a way to process their experiences, maybe.
Quite possibly. The performance of the Rule Britannia overture at the Conservatoire unfortunately didn't garner the public enthusiasm they'd hoped for, leading to this clear sense of failure in that endeavor. Consequently, they returned to the more pragmatic task of arranging Donizetti's operas. This period was also marked by a sense of increasing detachment, an extreme renunciation of the world, suggesting a growing disillusionment with their Parisian ambitions.
Social gatherings offered occasional breaks from the struggle, like an evening with the Ard family, champagne, a passionate speech. But these brief moments were often overshadowed by financial anxieties, like the subtenant departing unexpectedly, leaving them unable to pay rent, which dealt a significant blow to their already strained hopes.
Right.
A temporary solution arose with an offer to take over an apartment, furniture included for a few months, ultimately leading to the decision to seek a more affordable summer residence outside Paris in Meudon.
During their time in Meudon, they found a literary outlet writing 2 humorous articles for Lee Wald's newspapers, one reflecting on their disappointing Paris experiences, another depicting Hermann Faust. A significant development occurred through contact with Leon Pillet, the manager of the opera, who was intrigued by the draft of Der Fliegende Holländer and expressed interest in buying the plot. This led to the sale of Le Vaisseau Fantôme, the Phantom Ship, for 500 francs. A decision that marked a final, perhaps reluctant, letting go of their aspirations for immediate success within the Parisian opera scene.
Wow, 500 francs. Okay. Despite facing terrible privations, they continued their dedicated work on orchestrating their Fliegende Holländer. The early arrival of autumn, their inability to return to Paris with the Avenarius family due to lack of funds, led to Miss Chargen's surprise and the author's somewhat strained explanation of being too busy. Following the end of their sublet, they moved to a very small, cold apartment, further highlighting their difficult living conditions. The need for peace and quiet to fully concentrate on the Fliegende Holländer overture became increasingly crucial amidst these hardships.
A final visit to the Grand Opera to attend Reine de Chypre provided a renewed perspective, leading to a recognition of the artistic weaknesses in such works and a renewed appreciation for Halevy's compositions. Schlesinger, recognizing their talent and maybe their need for income, requested the author contribute to German journals. During this period of reflection and renewed focus, they began sketching the subject of Die Sarazen, inspired by a medieval romance.
Interesting.
This exploration of new narrative territory marked the opening of a fresh creative world, although the specific form for what would eventually become Lohengrin hadn't fully materialized yet.
The longing for a swift return to Germany became increasingly intense. In a significant move to facilitate this, they sent the score of Rienzi to the influential Meyerbeer in Berlin with a letter for Count Radern, hoping to leverage his influence for a potential production.
A big gamble.
Yeah. Surprisingly, the work was accepted rather promptly, just 2 months later. However, it was later discovered that Count Radern had since retired, rendering his consent non-minding a frustrating twist of fate.
Oh, it's rough.
The welcome, albeit delayed, news regarding the potential Berlin production of Rienzi finally paved the way for their long-awaited return to Germany. Their journey through the scenic German Rhine district was marked by an ominous first sighting of Wartburg Castle, a place that would later hold significance. They finally arrived in Dresden in April 1842, a moment that brought a palpable sense of relief after their extended time abroad. Upon their return to Dresden, they eagerly shared their work, playing and singing excerpts from Der Fliegende Holländer for relatives, which sparked considerable interest. However, their sister Louisa later remarked that the impact wasn't quite the same when she eventually saw the opera staged in Dresden, perhaps highlighting the power of the composer's own interpretation.
Possibly.
They also made a point of visiting their old friend Apel, who, despite being blind, remained cheerful and optimistic, offering a touching reunion.
Observing the renowned Madame Schroeder-Devrient again, they noted her undiminished creative power despite a life filled with significant events, but also maybe a somewhat disheartening observation about the potentially corrosive effects of theatrical life on our character. A conversation with the composer Lortzing about his struggles to elicit enthusiasm from singers, despite feeling he had a good deal of melody, using Schroeder-Devrient inconsistent performances as an example, led to the author promising to create something specifically for him.
The atmosphere in Dresden was charged with anticipation for the premiere of Rienzi. Sitting in a pit box alongside Minna, their sister Clara, and the Hind family, the author felt this curious sense of detachment from their own creation as the performance unfolded.
Strange feeling.
Yeah. Though they couldn't help but feel agitated by the sight of the packed auditorium, the audience's unwavering attention, holding them captivated even until midnight during the final act, filled the author with a sense of bewilderment. The thunderous calls for the composer and the singers that erupted after midnight marked a truly dramatic public success.
Huge success. Despite the outward triumph, the author confessed to feeling a sense of desperation at the opera's considerable length, a sentiment perhaps amplified by the reactions of their relatives. The inability to secure tickets for esteemed figures like Friedrich Brockhaus and Herr Julius Schleuderbach speaks to the high demand. A growing resistance to seeking favor with critics began to solidify, a stance that would unfortunately lead to lifelong opposition from the press. The casting of Wagner in the demanding leading role of Rienzi, despite some reservations about his suitability, was ultimately driven by the author's faith in the leading soprano, who, notably, expressed a deep appreciation for the opera's poetry.
The praise garnered by the author after Rienzi likely caused some unease for Mendelssohn, given their differing aesthetic leanings. However, in a surprising moment of apparent artistic endorsement, Mendelssohn made a remarkable statement on their way home from a joint concert rehearsal, seemingly acknowledging the validity of the author's musical direction.
Interesting.
A subsequent trip to Berlin with Devrient led to a meeting with the celebrated Franz Liszt, though the encounter began awkwardly with Madame Devrient's embarrassing reminder of a past dismissal in Paris. Oh dear.
Yeah, awkward indeed. The initial audience granted by the king marked the pinnacle of the author's career in Dresden. Yet this success was quickly followed by anxieties about their financial situation despite the new appointment. The unexpected reappearance of the long-forgotten musical director from Riga in the new role of royal conductor added an unforeseen complication to the musical landscape in Dresden.
Right.
Almost immediately, demands from creditors in Königsberg, and even from individuals with claims dating back to their student days, created significant financial pressure. A noticeable shift occurred in how others treated the author following the royal appointment, with envy and resentment becoming increasingly prevalent in the press.
A conflict arose with Lipinski regarding promotion within the orchestra. Lipinski advocating seniority, the author prioritizing artistic merit according to their oath to the king. Surprisingly, this stance was met with unified opposition from the orchestra itself.
Wow.
Despite occasional successes, Dresden began to feel more like a burden than a source of fulfillment.
Amidst these challenges in Dresden, a lasting friendship began to form, with the musical director assigned to work alongside the author. Notably, this director was Catholic, contrasting with the two Protestant conductors already in place. Their initial interaction involved the director bringing an opera score to the author seeking their opinion. This gesture quickly led to a strong positive impression, and the director, demonstrating respect and perhaps deference, refrained from further troubling the author with his own work until a more personal, collaborative relationship had developed.
Madame Schroeder-Devrient is described as a woman of great sensitivity in a rather coarse environment, and her genuine appreciation for der Fliegende Holländer provided crucial early encouragement when Rienzi had left the public somewhat perplexed. She was among the first to embrace the author's evolving artistic direction after Rienzi, and in recognition of her support, the published opera was dedicated to her.
Following this period, the author returned to Schönau, where their wife had been staying. This move brought an improvement in their living situation compared to previous frugal circumstances. They invited their sister Clara and mother for a visit, fostering familial reconnection. They also attempted to work on the Tannhäuser music at a place called the Ecke, but frustration with the piano led to initial sketching of the Venusberg music.
Their time in Teplitz involved pleasant excursions, enjoying the city, learning about the happy marriages of youth friends. Upon returning to Dresden, they resumed duties as musical conductor, settling back into routine. They also planned to establish a more spacious home in the Osterallee, signaling a desire for greater stability. Decisions were made not to pursue lost Italian language skills due to conducting demands, and they dedicated themselves to thoroughly preparing for studying universal history.
Broadening horizons.
Yeah, indicating broader intellectual pursuits. Their move into the new home was filled with hopes for extended peace and enjoyment.
The limited scenic resources in Dresden necessitated reliance on Berlin's more extensive staging capabilities for Der Fliegende Holländer. However, there was immediate annoyance at the Berlin manager's decision to use the opera as a near stopgap production for the comedy theater.
Oh, no.
Despite futile protests, there was a sense the opera would be relegated to a conductor's opera, lacking the full theatrical treatment it deserved. Determined to ensure its success, the author traveled to Berlin. Finding the appointed conductor, Henning or Henniger, inadequate, the author stepped in to take over rehearsals and performances. Despite weaknesses in the string section, the author felt overall satisfaction with the performances, although Schroeder-Devrient was notably absent.
The Berlin performances were met with increasing enthusiasm and boisterous applause, suggesting a positive public reception. Mendelssohn happened to be in Berlin then, adding an interesting layer. The author received congratulations from the influential Meyerbeer. However, this initial success was followed by hostile press reviews the next morning, which significantly influenced public opinion. Really underscores the power critics can wield. Amidst all this, a moment of reminiscing with Heine, during which the author may have been, well, inebriated.
Following one of the Berlin performances, a peculiar visitor appeared, offering high praise for Der Fliegende Holländer. Despite the late hour and cold room, the visitor persisted in their desire to converse. They revealed they'd attended the performance and understood the author's emotional state. To the author's surprise, the visitor mentioned they'd actually met the previous day at Mendelssohn's residence. This visitor, Professor Werder, explained the author's conversation had made such a profound impression, it prompted him to attend the second performance.
Returning to Dresden brought a deepening sense of confinement within the routine of official duties. Colleague Reisiger offered cynical comfort, suggesting the author would eventually abandon their idealistic operatic ambitions. The author found their dislike for routine methods intensifying, particularly after observing how even renowned conductors approached masterpieces, citing Mendelssohn's incorrect tempo for the minuet in his St. Paul as an example. While Reisiger initially agreed, Mendelssohn held a different opinion. Adding to the unease, conductor Krebs abruptly resigned from Dresden due to what he deemed intolerable conditions.
The arrival of a Russian Grand Duke in Dresden sparked patriotic pride, and it was during this period they conceived a clear musical idea for the Tannhäuser March. This march became the most popular melody composed up to that point, achieving significant public acclaim. A subsequent rehearsal with a large ensemble visibly moved the royal family, with the Queen offering complimentary remarks.
Preparations began for Tannhäuser with a target completion date of October 15th. A performance of Rienzi was attended by notables, including Spontini, Meyerbeer, and General Loff, though the author expressed little interest in their impressions. Spontini's subsequent return to Dresden to personally direct La Vestale generated both excitement and apprehension, leading to hurried preparations.
The preparations for Spontini's arrival felt almost surreal. Schroeder-Devrient offered to be a scapegoat if needed. Precise instructions were given for the baton. The pianoforte rehearsal with Spontini revealed his musical desires, showing apparent contradictions in behavior and artistic views, with a strong emphasis on dramatic declamation and rhythm.
The singers grew apprehensive hearing Spontini's pronouncements about pensions. Edouard Devrient helped achieve distinct ensembles. Spontini insisted on ending the opera with a specific duet, contrary to German theater cuts. He expressed a dismissive view of novelty, emphasizing subject matter, Roman, Spanish-Mexican, Greco-Macedonian, or German, held a negative opinion of the Romantic style à la Freischütz. The author and Ruckel shared silent gratitude towards the Holy Father and King of Denmark, seemingly unrelated figures. The author assured Spontini his advice would be considered. Despite this, Spontini later remarked the author fled Dresden for political reasons, disconnected from their musical discussions.
Following his nomination, the author conducted Hans Heiling, though admittedly perfunctorily, encountered promotional material from Marschner in Paris. Ferdinand Hiller returned to Dresden. His opera was staged. Despite other activities, the Dresden public continued showing lasting enthusiasm for Rienzi, prompting Laum's remark on Dresden's rich artistic offerings.
Exceptional care was taken preparing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony for Palm Sunday. Orchestrating the scherzo with 8 wind instruments, muffled drums for powerful effect, influenced by thoughts of Weber. called upon to speak before the performance, experiencing a long, unnerving silence before regaining composure and delivering the discourse fluently, impressing Emile Devrient.
The supper scene in Tannhäuser elicited mixed reactions during rehearsals, some finding it tedious, led the author to realize their limited control over the production. Contention arose regarding the Sängerkrieg, concert of arias, or dramatic poetry competition. Lack of attention to stage directions in Der Fliegende Holländer highlighted the need to personally instruct singers for Tannhäuser.
Right.
Tinder Ticacek had an excellent voice and rhythm, but struggled with deeper meaning, illustrated during the Sängerkrieg when he directed praise meant for Venus towards Elizabeth, echoing Schroeder-Devrient's earlier warnings.
The author encountered difficulty conveying nuances of a passage to Ticacek, who rendered it mechanically. Ironically, subsequent Tannhäuser productions often incorporated this misunderstanding as if approved. This contributed to disappointment with the opera's widespread success, feeling the hero was portrayed as merely penitent rather than with boundless energy. Amidst challenges, Ruckel, becoming a lifelong friend, expressed anxieties but remained an enthusiastic advocate.
Intellectual debates continued with Semper, who viewed the author as representing medieval Catholicism. Authors successfully persuaded Semper of their interest in German antiquity and Teutonic myths. Guskau's arrival as Dresden theater director raised hopes for a new era, regretting Lode hadn't secured the post. The meticulously prepared Beethoven's Ninth for Palm Sunday finally took place. Facing ongoing financial pressures, author petitioned for debt relief, anticipating future publishing income, though requiring further immediate sacrifices.
An invitation arrived from Stohr to produce a new work in Passau, despite prior offense given by general management, requiring efforts to mend relations. Author undertook extensive reworking of Gluck's Iphigenia in Aulis, cutting the final marriage, adding links and recitatives. Artistic gatherings in Dresden, started by Hiller, evolved into salons at his residence, seemingly promoting his standing. Hiller also established subscription concerts.
Following Iphigenia, author felt frustration at the focus on Gluck overshadowing their work. Eduard Devrient offered genuine appreciation. Early date set for Rienzi in Berlin, hoping to conduct. Substantial royalty from Berlin for Lachner's opera fueled hopes for improved finances if Rienzi succeeded. Primary ambition: establish Berlin as influential operatic center. Successful recommendation to Queen of Prussia raised hopes of gaining access to the king. Set off for Berlin in September with optimism.
Upon returning to Berlin after considerable absence, the city evoked familiarity. Professor Werder arranged lodging. Author became immersed in Rienzi preparations, noting official preparations seemed satisfactory. Significant disappointment with the tenor cast as hero. Excellent scenery, chorus, ballet, minor roles contrasted with insignificant main character portrayal. Public reception in October attributed more to brilliant passages than the lead.
A conversation with a well-connected individual about the king's generosity yielded discouraging response about seeking royal recognition, suggesting consulting opera manager Stuwinski. Visit to Bernhard Marx, previously interested in Der Fliegende Holländer, revealed his preoccupation. Continued efforts to access the king proved fruitless, relying on Count Radern despite his loyalty to Meyerbeer. Hope lingered the king would attend the commanded Rienzi performance. Frank shared disillusioning info about Prussia's failed conference efforts and critical views on Prussia. Author earnestly pointed out potential harm of Frank's comments.
Returned to Dresden carrying mixed cheering and consoling impressions from Berlin, contrasted with condolences from acquaintances hearing news of Berlin Opera's perceived failure. Despite disappointment, author felt compelled to project cheerful demeanor.
During author's absence, Hiller staged his new opera, Konradin von Hohenstaufen. Hiller and librettist hoped to combine elements of Rienzi and Tannhäuser for Dresden. Before leaving for Düsseldorf, Hiller confidently commended the work, acknowledging success was partly due to author's niece Johanna. Rehearsal. Lipinski suggested playing only first two movements of a symphony to hide key. Unexpected patriotic shout, "Long live the king." Dinner with Lüttichau. Initial coolness thawed. Wished author success, but later showed distress.
Author intended Vienna visit to understand political climate, impression, youthful confidence. Observed energetic participation of young Viennese defending city against Prince Windischgratz. Touched at Prague homeward, finding Kittel much more corpulent.
Lüttichau claimed pacifying imperial orchestra regarding author. Heard reverse from orchestra members, learning of pressure from court officials. Final disillusionment with Lüttichau due to false conduct. Bitter realization of inability to enlist his help for theater reform.
Author continued conducting duties while resuming studies. watched developments in friend Ruckel's fate amidst rumors of reactionary coup. Alarming placards appeared in Dresden with revolutionary slogans, causing unease. Windisch Graz's entry into Vienna, Froebel's acquittal, Blum's execution raised tensions in Dresden. Vast mourning demonstration for Blum.
Viennese fugitives arrived in Dresden, bolstering population's confidence. Greeted as Brother Democrat by foreign gentlemen en route to conduct Rienzi, reflecting politicized atmosphere.
Following Merry Wives of Windsor, Ruckel approached with passionate outburst, embraced, declaring author revolutionary. Stark realization. Impossibility of reconciliation with theater authorities. Definitive decision. Permanently turn away from theater. Cease meddling, signifying indifference to conductor position. Artistic ambitions, cutting off modern theatrical conditions.
Ludichau received exaggerated accounts, summoned author for wrathful tirade about various matters, including theater reform plan. Bakunin arrived in Dresden. Reckless energy, discussing revolution via Socratic method, dismissing tyrants as less obnoxious than smug Philistines. Perplexing views, shocking statement about Protestant parson, proved agreeable companion despite ideas.
Ruckel hiding, author invited him for supper. Ruckel's hearty eating contrasted Saxon frugality. Liszt's enthusiastic praise after Tannhäuser rehearsal in Weimar. Author viewed as fleeting episode due to artist-friendly feeling. Cordial letter from Liszt inviting author to Weimar for third Tannhäuser performance with native talent aiming to add to repertoire. Obtained leave of absence.
Conversation. King of Saxony's disinterest in abstruse subjects, heretic torture painting. Near Semper's fountain, bells of St. Anne's suddenly sounded tocsin of revolt. Companion terrified, disappeared, later fugitive and burned. Profound impression of bells clang. Goethe's Valmy sensations reflected changed square appearance.
Wandered through hasty barricades, observing amazing proceedings with sympathy. Town hall became revolution center. Consternation of those hoping for peaceful understanding. King and royal family departed. Bakunin dismissive of Dresden revolution. Communal guards assembled. Rietschel and Semper accosted author. Polish general placed in command. Bakunin foresaw Prussian attack. Urged acquiring experienced Polish officers. Volunteer corps arrived. Defense Department organized. Young Heine joined. Promises of support from Erzgebirge. Belief Old Town could defy occupation if well barricaded.
Found Ruckel at barricade near theater. Cheerful demeanor, matter-of-fact involvement. Bakunin ingeniously placed author behind straw mattress barricade for protection from sharpshooters. Spent night at refuge. Ruckel's encounter with Hebendahl, laughing dismissal of excuses. Ruckel briefly recounted activities, spared author report on Volksblatt, interrupted by troop of well-armed students.
Initial confusion, gradual understanding of events, abandoned personal considerations, surrendered stream of developments, farewell to city with sound of cannon fire, smile about contrasting obscurity of arrival, pomp of departure. Met armed reinforcements traveling with Minna towards Erzgebirge, shared involuntary joy. Gloomy impression of silent regular troops heading towards Dresden, reached relatives in Chemnitz, declared intention to return, terrifying loved ones.
Met Hubner, lawyer, leader of volunteer corps, briefly imprisoned. Saw Chemnitz town guard on hill communicating with Hubner. Provisional government invited to quarter at Chemnitz. Hubner gave order to march on Chemnitz after food. Author decided to travel ahead to escape chaos.
Reunion with Liszt in Weimar. Solace, understanding. Liszt's appreciation after rehearsal. Accepted Liszt's dinner invitation. Became alarmed by new trait. Stirred to rage by differing political views. Sought legal advice regarding danger. Differing opinions on handling potential arrest. Alarming reports of Prussian troops in Dresden. Liszt and friends urged immediate flight. Liszt provided funds, passport. Arranged accommodation with woman whose son knew Brekel. Hosts' laughter. Intention to avoid capture despite opera.
Minna arrived in Magdala on author's birthday, urging immediate permanent flight. Unable to share author's mood, viewed him as ill-advised. Arranged last farewell meeting at Professor Wolf's house in Jena. 6-hour walk at sunset. Coach drive to Zurich. Cheering effect of St. Gall countryside. First view of Glarner Alps. Immediate unconscious resolution to settle there. Accepted friend's suggestion. Refuge in Switzerland. Gave Tannhäuser School to Liszt's master as keepsake. Introductions to Jacob Sulzer, Franz Hagenbuch in Zurich. Immediate home feeling with respectful curiosity, sympathy. Great assurance, moderation of Swiss authorities regarding political refugees. Belloni offered refuge near La Fère-sous-Loire after frustrating Paris period. Short journey to Rai.
Necessity of restoring domestic peace with Minna. Author took blame for issues due to differing characters' educations. Unfortunate consequence. Lost power over her affections. Impossibility of same reconciliation methods. Minna's hardness. Wreck of marriage contributed to ruin of Dresden position. Need for complete break. Moved to modest bedroom at friend's house, gave up grand piano. difficult meals, more luxurious reception outside from young men met previously, gave Nibelungen, draft title Die Nibelungen Weltgeschichte aus der Saga, sent to Wigand. Wigand hoped scandal from Kunst und Revolution would benefit him. Discovered Wigand's plan for second edition without informing author. Minna arrived Zurich, looking aged. Author's pity overcame bitterness. Minna compared Zurich unfavorably to Dresden. Sold Dresden furniture, brought 300 marks, took small lodgings in Hinter and Eschehausen, new contract for more extensive work.
Period of comparative peace but growing unrest due to acquaintance with Feuerbach's works. Long-standing inclination to fathom philosophy, akin to mystical influence of Beethoven's Ninth. Failed initial efforts with Leipzig professors, intervention of revolution, German Catholic priest drew attention to Feuerbach. Gift to Feuerbach's book on death and mortality from New Zurich friend. Author never intended to turn Feuerbach's ideas into verse or expect him to write libretto. Chose legend of Wieland der Schmied, attracted by Simrock's version. Sketched complete 3-act scenario with dialogue, reluctantly handed over.
Renewed visit to Paris, seeking quiet rooms, found city too animated. Difficulty convincing government agent presence was artistic, not political refugee status. Agent impressed by score, lists article on Tannhäuser Overture. Met Semper, writing inferior artistic work, alarming news from Dresden, prisons filling, cordial unexpected welcome from Jesse, Gottfried Lassault in Bordeaux, interest due to Jesse's intimacy with Ritter family, letter from Minna urging immediate return to Paris to secure overture production, wouldn't understand if returned without achieving this. Minna complained to Mrs. Taylor about author's intention to commit adultery based on misinterpreted remark. Author wrote to Minna, offering to set her free from immediate participation in fate, promising half future earnings. Reminded Minna of earlier willingness to part in Switzerland. Jessie once playfully stated she belonged to no particular social circle.
So as we draw together these early threads of the author's life, we really see a compelling picture emerge, don't we?
Yeah.
The formative impact of theater and music. Those early stabs at creative expression met with both encouragement and criticism. The fluctuating fortunes of their academic pursuits and the ever-present complexities of social and romantic relationships, they all played such a crucial role. And underpinning these personal experiences, that growing awareness of broader political and social forces that would eventually lead to dramatic upheaval.
Absolutely. These weren't just random events. They were the fundamental building blocks that shaped the individual. You can clearly see how these early passions, the struggles they faced, the intricate web of relationships they navigated, it all contributed to the person they were becoming. Laid the essential groundwork for their subsequent path, even though we haven't gone into the specifics of those later achievements today.
Exactly. And when you consider these foundational elements, it naturally leads you to ponder how they might have manifested in their later, more widely recognized artistic endeavors. That inherent dramatic sensibility, the intense musical language, the exploration of deep human emotions, the forces of society, it all seems to have its origins right here in these formative early experiences.
It really does give you a new perspective. So for you, our listener, what moments or relationships in your early life, perhaps ones that seemed insignificant at the time, might actually hold the key to understanding the direction of your own passions and the path you've taken? It's definitely food for thought.